Video, Purple Political Talk here, and today we're going to be doing an analysis of the 2020 senatorial races across the nation. So there's, I think 34 or 36, including special elections in the United States Senate this time around, and we're just going to analyze them. So we're going to start by filling our safe states, and first thing I want to say is that nationwide we're having a big Democratic movement. And I don't think it's mostly because of how the Democrats are doing or what they're saying, but rather votes against Donald Trump. I know a lot of people are voting in the mentality of, I'm not voting for Joe Biden, I'm voting against Trump. And that mentality is usually what leads to many different things in politics, but in the Senate race, it's a mixture of the anti-Trump vote along with the mixture of very atrocious Republican candidates. I mean, if Republicans could have picked better candidates like they did in 2010 in the Tea Party movement, they honestly would have had great candidates, and they probably would have a lot of bigger chances of winning these races. But now, since they chose these atrocious candidates who do not even have a chance of winning some of these races that should have been competitive, that is where Republicans are going to be struggling, and that's going to be one of the major reasons why they might lose the Senate. Take a state like Virginia, that in normal circumstances should be a pretty, like swingish state. Of course, it's been trending a lot more Democratic, but Republicans should be able to pull out a candidate and do have somewhat of a good showing. But since Mark Warner, the incumbent senator, is currently unopposed, quote unquote, realistically, there's no way to analyze that election, and I think it's already a safe state for the Democratic Party. So, we're gonna start this map, and let's fill in our lean Democratic states. And I think the biggest things we've seen change is the primaries, and we know who's facing Mitch McConnell, and we know the debacle with the Nebraska primary, with the Nebraska Senate race, and kind of already going safe to Deb Fisher or Ben Sasse. I forgot who's running in this race. But still. So, let's start by filling in our likely states for the Democratic Party. At this point, they have a lot of likely states in states like Colorado. That's the first flip of the night. I would say states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New Hampshire at this point. These four states are currently in the likely column for the Democratic Party. And guys, also remember that we're in a position for the Democrats are in a lot better position than they were in 2018. Because remember, in 2018, Democrats were defending a lot of seats. In this case, Republicans are defending a lot more seats. So to get to the majority, I think Democrats realistically need to win. I think it's 7 seats and then plus one more, and it's pretty doable considering that 4 of these states are already looking like they're gonna go by likely margins. So they realistically just have to pick some other 3 out. So these races, I think Hickenlooper in Colorado has that done deal. Cory Gardner is not winning whether a miracle or something happens, because it is technically impossible because he's so unpopular going against someone so popular. It would be probably an election upset, like one of the biggest ones in history, if Cory Gardner pulls it off, which I think he won't. Minnesota and Michigan are in similar votes. You have Tina Smith, pretty popular incumbent, and Gary Peters. I mean, okay, in popularity, and you have to in Minnesota you really don't have a notable opponent. In Michigan you have John James, which gave Debbie Stabenow a very good run for her money in 2018, and now we're gonna see him go against Gary Peters. Gary Peters is probably gonna win by 5 points, and realistically, Republicans are focusing their money, I think, in the wrong places, and some places they are doing it right. They should be focusing a lot of money into races in North Carolina, in races like Arizona and Montana and Iowa. These races are where they realistically need a good impact, and they realistically need a lot of money to go ahead and beat these candidates that are Democrats and have huge amounts of money. And in New Hampshire, last state of the likely column for the Democrats, you have Jean Shaheen. She's pretty popular. I mean, there's no question about that. And she really doesn't have a big noticeable opponent for the Senate race. So I think Jean Shaheen will go on to be the next senator from the state of New Hampshire. So as we finish our Democratic likely states, let's move on to Republican likely states. So I think at this point, states like Alaska, states like Alabama, states like Kentucky, states like West Virginia, and states like South Carolina would go to the to the Republican likely column. So these states are very interesting in the fact that these states usually are never contested, but they're all for different ways. In Alaska, you have Al Gross, who is giving Dan Sullivan a run for his money. And Dan Sullivan probably will win. I mean, Republicans in Alaska, it's pretty like on and off relationship. You had a long time where Republicans were governor, like Sarah Palin, super unpopular nationwide, but she was very popular in Alaska. And then you had the independent governor, and you had a time that Mark Begich gave I forgot if it was the governor. I think it was the governor's race in Alaska. He gave a good run for their money. And in states like Alabama, it's no question that's going to be sort of contested because you have an incumbent Democrat. He's probably gonna fall in the same kind of ratio that Cory Gardner will fall in the state of Colorado. But not John Hickenlooper, Tommy Tuberville will probably go in and beat Doug Jones probably by 5 points. And that's going to be one of the biggest losses for the Democrats, and I think that might be the only seat they might lose. But other than that, Democrats are in a very good position to start gaining seats. Instead of South Carolina, you have Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham. It's not going to be as close probably as some Alabama Senate race, but it's going to be rather in the likely margin by 10 or 15 points. Jamie Harrison, I mean, has a chance to get close, but he probably doesn't have a realistic shot at winning the state. And what I know about South Carolina politics is that the African American electorate is a big part, but then you also have the people who live in the rural areas, which are also, I think, a majority of the state. So that's why we're seeing a lot more. It's leaning more Democratic, but at the end of the day, those are not the majority. The Democrats are not the majority in the state, and that's why Lindsey Graham, although he might be unpopular, he's going to stay in his seat like the same way I think Mitch McConnell will stay. Moving on to Kentucky, I mean, Mitch McConnell is the most unpopular senator in the United States, nationwide as well as in his own constituencies. And looking at it, I mean, the reason why he gets reelected is because he's so unpopular, but people just don't want to change because then all these different things. So the Kentucky primary, I think it was called, if I'm not incorrect, and I think Amy McGrath won the primary. So it's going to be Amy McGrath versus Mitch McConnell. I mean, the only real way that I think Mitch McConnell could fall from his Senate seat would be if he says something bad about education, because Kentucky teachers are one of the biggest voting blocks, and that is truly what gave Andy Beshear the victory in the state of Kentucky in 2019. So Mitch McConnell is looking like he's going to stay in his Senate seat, but he's going to have a contested race. Probably going to be by the same margins we see a state like Alaska or Alabama go by. And West Virginia, I just wanted to mention it. It's Shelly capital. But remember that this state is very... I think Richard Ojeda was running for this Senate seat. But I think very interesting in the state of West Virginia is the fact that it's very conservative, but they also like Democrats. Joe Manchin is very popular in the state, and their governor was actually a Democrat before he changed to the Republican Party. So it is considerable, and if they the Democrats ran the right candidate, they could probably win that race. And so this is going to be our likely map, and let's move on to our lean states. So for the Democrats, I think states like Arizona and states like North Carolina would fall into the lean column, as well as states like Maine. So with these three states, what I think is going to happen is that you have a very unpopular incumbent in the state of Maine, Suzanne Collins. She's been voting more and more with the president, which has turned off a lot of the Maine voters. So for that reason, Sarah Gaden will probably win that race. In North Carolina, Kyle Cunningham has raised unsurmountable amounts of money, outraising the incumbent senator, Tom Tillis, by 2 times, which is considerable in these multi-million-dollar Senate races. So I think he's going to have a nice shot at winning there. Arizona, it's no question that Martha McSally is super unpopular. I could actually see this race move into the likely column, but I think actually more in the likely column will fall better. I don't know why I didn't call that earlier. But I think Mark Kelly will have great showing in the state of Arizona, beating Martha McSally. And look, with the McCain family, which is one of the most, if not the most, prominent political families in the state of Arizona, endorsing the Democrats in a lot of these races, I could certainly see Democrats take very good shot at almost statewide. And there's the governor's race that isn't coming soon, and that could just be enough for Democrats to just take control of the state of Arizona as a whole. So those are all my states in the lead column for the Democrats. Let's move to the Republicans. So states like Texas, realistically speaking, they're kind of in the same boat. As they're in the kind of tilting room. I could see it go by likely margins, but also by lean margins. So you have John Cornyn, who is actually more unpopular than Ted Cruz, and he is going against a MJ Hegar, which she's the Senate candidate. But here's the thing: if people are thinking this could go down to the smaller margins seen in the 2018 Senate race, it was I think 2 or 3 points, which is pretty great for a Democrat in the state of Texas, statewide. So I don't think she's going to be the same type of candidate as a Beto O'Rourke. She's gonna get close, but it's probably not gonna be as close. Instead of being 2 to 3 points, it's probably gonna go by 4 to 5 points, and I could see John Cornyn win by even 5 to 7 points. So it's just the way they use resources and things like that. I also think at this point, Georgia's two Senate elections, both the special and the regular Senate election, those two, I think that honestly, the Republicans have a good shot at winning by likely margins. So in one, you have a jungle primary style, so we do not know who's going to be the candidates in the runoff. So it's looking like it's going to be someone like Raphael Warnock. He's a very popular preacher, I think he was, or reverend, in the state of Georgia, going against either Doug Collins or going against Kelly Loeffler. And then in the state of Georgia, regular Senate election, you have John Ossoff going against David Perdue. So that's going to be an interesting race because that might be a closer race than the special election, which is quite amusing. So those 3 Senate seats, I think, are pretty solid for the Republican Party. Now we're going to go to our tilt states. And I think Democrats have a good showing in 2 of these states. The state of Montana and the state of Kansas. Well, Steve Daines, the current incumbent in the state of Montana, has very good resources and he's expending them very well. I think Steve Bullock just has more resources and he's just more popular than someone like Steve Daines. For that reason, I think Steve Bullock will narrowly win the Montana Senate race and flipping it to another seat. And look, a Democratic majority looked like it was going to be a far way in 2020. If you were asking us in 2016 or 2018 when we were looking at this map, it looked atrocious for the Democratic Party. But now that we have a lot of the primary candidates, all these different effects, Democrats have a really good chance at the Senate. And right now, with just these last 2 states, and this is just my general prediction, 52 to 48, which is pretty good, but they could even expand if they win states like Kentucky, Georgia perhaps, and it's just a way to building block. And I think this map is just the general, like if they put 50% effort, if they put a lot less effort, they will like lose states like Montana and Kansas. But if they put a lot more effort, they could take states like Georgia and Texas. So, I think at the end of the day, Montana is going to go to the Democratic Party narrowly. Kansas, Barbara Bollier, she's somewhat popular, and she's way more popular than Chris Kobach. Chris Kobach lost a governor's race in the state of Kansas by around 3 points in 2018, which, considering the state of Kansas and how it is pretty surprising. And Barbara Bollier used to be a Democrat, a Republican, my bad, and she changed to a Democrat. So she's going to have an appeal to the Republicans because she used to be one. And honestly, with the unpopularity of Chris Kobach, this Senate seat should be pretty wrapped up for Chris Kobach. And I want to give you guys an interesting fact. I don't know if you guys didn't know, but Mike Pompeo wanted to run for the Senate seat, but then he just decided to stay as Secretary of State. So it's pretty interesting because he's from the state of Kansas, and if he did run, I think he would have gotten that Senate seat pretty easily. Last but not least, we have the state of Iowa, and I think Joni Ernst will narrowly hold on. Theresa Greenfield could be very popular. She could be pretty influential and pretty just inspiring as a whole. But Joni Ernst will probably have the upper hand in the Senate race narrowly because of the turnout with farm voters and rural areas, as well as some of the older populations that vote in the state of Iowa. And Theresa Greenfield could have all these resources and everything, but you have to come up from a deficit. You have to break the deficit and win by 1. So At this point in time, I think Joni Ernst will win the seat of Iowa, but at the end of the day, it won't be enough to put the Republicans over the top, as my final prediction for the United States Senate in 2020 is 52 Democrats to 48 Republicans. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like and subscribe, and turn on post notifications. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I see you real soon. Bye!